Welcome to the Old-Fashioned Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasons, while drinking an old-fashioned. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button now. Platforms other than YouTube tend to block some of our content. Subscribe now to get up-to-date videos and shorts as they release. Now, enjoy this episode.
The Secret History of Prince Hall Freemasonry. Excluded from mainstream white Freemasonry, African Americans in the early U.S. founded a branch rooted in advocacy and the fight for civil rights. Mention Freemasonry, a fraternal organization that traces its roots to medieval stonemason guilds in Europe, and most people imagine a secretive culture with mysterious motives, something antiquated, out of touch, and insular. Since its members united to establish the first Grand Lodge in 1717, accusations and conspiracy theories have been lobbed at the group. But there is another story of Freemasonry, one surrounding the predominantly white, mainstream version. It is the story of Prince Hall Freemasonry, the parallel and internationally recognized African American branch of Masonry. The oldest African American fraternal organization in the United States, predating the Constitution and the election of the first president. Since its inception, Prince Hall Freemasonry has carried on a separate tradition from the mainstream order, one rooted in advocacy and the fight for civil rights. As the organization grew, Prince Hall lodges counted enslaved black men and abolitionists amongst their members, yet remained unrecognized by mainstream Freemasonry. Today, Prince Hall Freemasonry continues to inspire. The organization operates internationally and counts over 300,000 men in its ranks, including families who have passed along membership through generations. Prince Hall Freemasonry, born from a house divided. As Freemasons grew in popularity among white colonists, African Americans in early America took an interest in the order, too. The story of African American Freemasonry began in 1775, when abolitionist Prince Hall and 14 other free black men sought initiation into the all-white St. John's Lodge in Boston. Despite Freemasonic doctrine stating that all men are equal, the members of St. John's Lodge rejected Prince Hall and his cohort. Undaunted, they sought international recognition from an older lodge overseas. They successfully petitioned the Grand Lodge of Ireland, and on March 6, 1775, founded the African Lodge I, today known as African Lodge 459. From the start, African Lodge 459 and other African American lodges that followed in its footsteps faced adversity from the Grand Lodges governing each individual state. In the United States, African American lodges were considered illegitimate or clandestine by their fellow white lodges. The Prince Hall organization became very independently recognized within the black community, said Christopher Hodden, Masonic historian and author of several books on Freemasonry. Pastors and congregants were often Prince Hall Masons. The church, along with the Prince Hall lodges many of its members belonged to, developed into some of the few safe spaces for African Americans to assemble. The idea of organizing in any and all ways was appealing to free African Americans. The idea of organizing in any and all ways was appealing to free African Americans, whether it was church-based or Masonic-based. When hopes for abolishing slavery started to become a reality, President Abraham Lincoln, unable to imagine a United States where formerly enslaved people lived harmoniously side by side with white Americans, proposed emancipated blacks be sent abroad to colonize regions today known Liberia and Panama. In an attempt to push this plan forward, in 1862, Lincoln invited a delegation of 5 free black men, 4 of which were members of Prince Hall lodges, to meet with him at the Capitol and discuss the colonization of Panama. The 5-man delegation rejected the idea, and Lincoln abandoned his plan. Why? Because if Lincoln had gotten his way, there would be no African Americans in the country today. They all would have been shipped out. Prince Hall Freemasons joined the struggle for civil rights. Eventually, Prince Hall lodges began to gain official recognition from Grand Lodges in the states, and their efforts to support their communities continued. During the segregation era, Prince Hall lodges were one of the few places that African Americans could congregate, said Alton Roundtree, Prince Hall Freemason and author of multiple historical books on Prince Hall Freemasonry, describing the limited number of institutions where African Americans could organize. Members called the lodges a safe space. During this time, men now heralded as important figures in the struggle for civil rights were active in Prince Hall lodges in states on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line. Leaders like late Senator Elijah Cummings, former NAACP President Kwesi Mfume, Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, and late Congressman John Lewis were all active members. And when Prince Hall Masons in Jackson, Mississippi constructed the M.W. Stringer Lodge in 1995, they intended the building to be shared. Freemasons were given a safe space to meet and conduct business, while civil rights leaders were given a place to organize. Despite their achievements, Prince Hall Freemasons remain unrecognized in some states, all in the American South. Despite their achievements, over 200 years passed before Prince Hall Freemasons began to gain official recognition in the United States. In 1989, the Grand Lodge of Connecticut became the first mainstream lodge to acknowledge Prince Hall Freemasonry as a legitimate organization. A few states, all in the American South, still consider Prince Hall Freemasonry a clandestine organization. All of them traditionally slave states. Prince Hall lodges remain largely absent from the biographies of many individual African American icons. As a black man, you didn't flaunt it, because of your circumstance, Wardley said, explaining the comparative discretion of older generations of Prince Hall Masons. I think we hid for too long, he added. But we hid for protection. Continuing the legacy. There are now Prince Hall lodges in every state in the U.S., and the organization operates internationally, with military lodges in countries like Italy, Korea, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Afghanistan. Although Prince Hall lodges estimate that currently, over 98% of their membership is black and that white and Latino are less than 2%. How much of this did you know? Can you believe there are still Grand Lodges in the United States that don't recognize Prince Hall? Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and leave us a comment. The Old-Fashioned Masonic Podcast, where real Masons talk about Freemasonry.